Hi guys, so welcome back to another video on my channel. I wanted to talk to you very quickly about a book that I just finished called Paperweight by Meg Haston. This book follows around our main character. It's called Stevie, and Stevie is being shipped into a eating disorder care facility, so basically like a rehab kind of unit. So this book was a relatively short book. I read it in about 2 or 3 days, and I really, for some reason, I read a lot of books about eating disorders, and I don't personally have a huge history of my own with eating disorders or anything of the like. I definitely remember being a young person and thinking about eating disorders, and definitely suffering a little bit from you know, just wanting to look a bit different and really struggling with my self-worth and really loving my body for what it is and all that kind of stuff. And it's definitely a journey I've been on, but I myself have not suffered from an eating disorder. I do, however, find the whole process of eating disorders, the mental aspect to it and all of that kind of stuff particularly interesting, because I know that in my work with young people, I've met a lot of young people that do have eating disorders. I work a lot with girls, and I feel like it's ridiculously important that we educate ourselves on eating disorders, not just because they're a mental kind of struggle that young people have, but because the death rate for eating disorders is the biggest of any kind of mental illness out there. We follow the story of Stevie, and her story does kind of start to unfold a little bit more over time, and we see that she's really been wrestling and struggling with the death of her brother. So this starts to unfold a bit more, as well as her friendship with this girl. I definitely found the relationships that were explained in the book particularly interesting. The relationship between her and her friend and her brother Josh was really interesting. And what I'm really like, I don't even know, I'm kind of happy with it, is that the whole thing of her brother and her friend and all of that stuff isn't really the reason for her eating disorder. It's almost like the reason for her eating disorder is never really explained, and I think this is incredibly awesome, because people look for reasons why people got eating disorders, and sometimes there just isn't a clear-cut reason. It is a mental disorder. So I feel like it's kind of uneducated to say, oh, this is the reason why they got an eating disorder, because like it's just not always that simple. I think sometimes it could just be a thought or something somebody said. It could be a really small thing that just snowballed into a bigger thing. So I did give this book a 3 out of 5 star rating. I did really enjoy this book. I read it, as I said, I read it really quickly. I found Stevie's character was awesome. I started to fall in love with the other characters. Her roommate Ashley, I just love her. I feel like she's just beautiful. The shrink who's at the treatment center, I love her too. And oh, it's just, I just feel like all of the characters and stuff like that are just a really beautiful portrayal of Stevie's whole recovery. Is that it's you don't see her entirely recover, but you see the process of her starting to slowly, really slowly recover. And I love the contrast of the new girl who comes in after Stevie's been in there for a while, who is acting, you realise is acting just like Stevie did when she first got there, but it's almost like you didn't even realise it, but Stevie's actually started to recover, but you didn't even notice it was happening. It's kind of amazing, and I think it's so wonderful to read a story about recovery, and not just the eating disorder and how it came about, but the actual process of recovery and what that looks like for a young person. I did find the book was quite dark, and I wouldn't really, and for that reason alone, I wouldn't really recommend it to a lot of people. I would definitely say that if you do have a history of eating disorders or any kind of like body dysmorphic or anything like that, that I wouldn't really recommend this book to you, because it could be incredibly triggering. And I realize that yeah, if this is a special interest of yours, reading about eating disorders or mental disorders, then you might really get something out of this book. But I feel like in a bunch of ways it was great, but it wasn't super informed, and I feel like every disorder is different, you know, like there are no two that are the same, and so it was a really cool perspective from that kind of thing. I wish the book was a little bit longer. I wish there was a little bit more detail, a little bit more fleshing out of Stevie's story. I feel like it ended ridiculously abruptly. I did really like the ending and the way it kind of drew to a close, but it was quite abrupt, and I really just wish it was a bit longer. I wish there was just a little bit more story and we got to see her and some of the other characters just for a little bit longer. I feel like we just were cut off a little bit too soon in the story. I did really enjoy this book. It wasn't my favourite from the last month or so, but it was definitely pretty good, and I probably wouldn't recommend it, but I enjoyed it because of my own special weird interest in eating disorders and just wanting to read about them. There are a bunch of really good books that are quite a bit more revealing about the disease itself, and there's one I read end of last year, beginning of this year, called Brave Girl Eating, and that book is that's just amazing, and it's from the mother's perspective of her daughter having an eating disorder, and I've never read anything like it, and I would recommend that. It's actually amazing, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's very triggering for, I've got the hiccups, I wouldn't say it's as triggering for people who have a history with eating disorders or anything like that. Anyway, let me know if you have read this book, thoughts are, if you've read any other books that are around the same subject matter, because I do have a special interest in it, and I will see you guys in my next video.